I'm Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live, where I discuss process and procedures for you to achieve success in the federal market. I like doing this every day at noon to 12:30, so we stick to our time. I spent 20 years as a small business owner, and since 2018, I've been teaching folks like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. And the process is A to Z and the steps in between. And today I'm going to talk to you about maybe some things you're doing along the way that you think are good process steps, but they're really stuff I want to encourage you to not work on, or certainly to minimize the amount of time you're working on. So I'm going to share 5 things today as we go forward. Gus, just giving my colleague Gus Phelps a heads up because he's kind of watching me on here. I cannot see my screen at all on LinkedIn, so I'm trusting everything looks great and we're going to rock and roll. Okay, so the 5 things I want to share with you, I'm going to go from the let's say the least important of my 5 tips, doing my back from number 5 first. So let's start with my favorite one. It's not the most important one that I think people are wasting time on, and they should reevaluate that time spent. But it is my number 5, and my favorite one is the FAR. I love saying, forget about the FAR. Stop worrying about the FAR. A lot of us small business owners or people who are in small businesses in the sales side, we get a little obsessed with the FAR because people will say, oh, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR, is where the government talks about government contracting, all the rules, et cetera. It's where all the complexity is of federal sales. And actually, to me, the FAR is not where the complexity is. The FAR is where the clarity is. But what we do sometimes is get a little obsessed with becoming an expert at the FAR. And you do not need to be an expert at the FAR. The people who have to be an expert at the FAR are contracting officers. In your company, maybe as the company grows, the person who needs to be an expert at the FAR is a contract manager whose job is to manage all the contracts, make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, et cetera. And maybe they need to become a FAR expert because they're the closest thing to the contracting officer we would have in our company, like the KO is on the government side. And so in the FAR, my recommendation to you is this: only pay attention to the FAR as you need to know about it. So there's this idea of just in case information and just in time information. And so just in case information means I want to know it all just in case it comes up, right? It's just fill in my head just in case it comes up. But if you switch that over to just in time information, you're only learning about the FAR as it relates to what you need to know today. If you have no money, then why do you need to pay attention to a regulation that talks about how you manage a contract, right? If you're a subcontractor under a small business, let's say, the only parts of the FAR you really have to pay attention to are the ones that are passed down from that prime contractor to you as a subcontractor. So just talk with the prime contractor, say, hey, what part of the FAR do I have to pay attention to? What's in the contract award that I have to pay attention to on the FAR? There's a ton of clauses in there, but don't try to become an expert because it's the same as trying to become an expert at tax law. You don't need to be an expert at tax law. You don't even need to really know anything about the tax law except for when you're filing the taxes and the parts that relate to you. If you don't have a rental property, why should you care about the tax law clauses that relate to rental properties, right? So number 5 thing I want you to stop wasting time on is the FAR and trying to become an expert at the FAR. Number 4, so backing down to number 4 on our path to number 1 issue today is category management and best in class. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say category management, best in class, congratulations, you're not wasting time in here. But there are a lot of us who get ourselves caught up in this dialogue of category management coming out of the federal government and GSA and best in class contract vehicles. So let me explain those 2 really quick and then tell you why I think you shouldn't pay attention to them. Category management basically is the government trying to take all the things it buys, right? Tons and tons of NAICS codes, PCS, whatever. And they're trying to group them into 19 categories. 10 of these categories are called common goods. They're the same things purchased basically across every federal agency, defense and civilian. So there's 10 of them that are called common goods. And then there's 9 of them that are defense specific. So there might be like ships and boats or something, right? 9 of them are over on the defense side wholly. But the thing about it is category management is just the government's way of trying to make it easier to administer all the purchasing that they do. And so they're trying to put it into these groups and figure out how they can improve their operations, how they do business, how they do acquisition. It's a way for them to group it and then begin to put policies and procedures around each one of them, and maybe begin to align contract vehicles, which is where we come into best in class. Best in class contract vehicles are these tier 3 contract vehicles. And if you're not aware of this, there are hundreds of thousands of contract vehicles out there. In the category management, there's a category called professional services. That one alone has more than 100,000 contract vehicles spread across all agencies. And so the way the government has defined those, GSA is leading the charge, but the government has defined these contract vehicles is that there's category 3, best in class. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. There's like 40 of them. And so these are the very best of the best of how clear they are, how well they work for the government, how fair the pricing is, all that kind of stuff. You can go watch another video where I explain the whole thing. Then it goes into category 2, category 1, and category 0. And category 0 is completely unmanaged, really at some points unknown. There's so many contract vehicles that are just one-offs being done everywhere that the government doesn't have a true holistic list of those contract vehicles. When you get into level 1, 2, and 3, those are called spend under management, or SUM, SUM. Spend under management is where the government's trying to get better on how they manage contract vehicles. Anyways, my point about this and why you should not focus too much on these is you're not going to influence this at all. The category management way of grouping what they buy is being done by hundreds and if not thousands of people in the government focused on that. And if you look at best in class contract vehicles, the complaint that sometimes is discussed by those of us in the industry is that best in class contract vehicles are shrinking the pool of small businesses maybe that can participate on these contract vehicles. An example is there might be a contract vehicle in there that's best in class and it only has 22 vendors. And what I want to say to you is there's not a lot you or I, and I have a lot of influence, right? I mean, I make it a point of being really influential in the government contracting space. Don't want to pretend like I can change things with a snap of my finger like Thanos, but I do have more influence than the average small business owner who's more focused on their business and not on the holistic picture of the small business world or in federal contracting. But anyways, my point is there's not a whole lot we can do about it. And so my recommendation for you is if you're going to look at best in class contract vehicles, in particular, the tier 3, or its little brother, if you will, tier 2s, just go get on them as a partner to the people who are on them. So if I looked at that one, and I think there's a contract vehicle called HCATS that's best in class that has like 22 vendors or something on it, I can sit there and complain about it or dwell on how unfair it is, or I can just go get on that contract vehicle, push opportunities to it with my teaming partner, get my 50% or whatever, right? I can get on there and maybe follow them as they go after contracts. What I would like to encourage you to do is to think proactively, how can you make this work for you? Turn it to a positive. Not to just beat my analogies into the ground here, but when life gives us lemons, make lemonade. When the government gives us best in class contract vehicles, go into turning that into something that can work for you. And I wanted to share one more story as it relates to best in class, because this is really important to me on, actually, I forgot that whole thought, right? This is live. I just had a great thought. It's gone. So hopefully it'll come back. But let me move to number 3. So number 3 on areas that we might be wasting our time. And when I say wasting our time, it's a soft way of saying this, but events are my number 3. I believe that we are wasting time focusing on conferences and expos, even matchmaking events, going down to HUD for one of their hub zone events. We keep looking at these events like they might be magically delivering us great relationships or contracts or get us access to the program. And what I want to put in your mind is that thinking about events is this constructive procrastination approach to meeting people. When you want to start and build relationships and you're using an event as a place where you hope to find good relationships, then you're not being proactive in developing your relationships, you're being reactive. what I would encourage you to do instead of focusing on events is to determine which agency do you want to get into. I want to get into HUD. It's like, okay, what do you sell and who is most likely the program office kind of running what you the services or the products that you have, who's managing that activity within HUD. Find that office, or HHS. It might be, going down to a subordinate command or agency like CDC as an example. Find out who that is. Find those people. Find their names, their phone numbers, their email. You can do this online. Tomorrow, I have a webinar on how to find and begin to build relationships with people. Just like I'm saying here, you can attend that webinar tomorrow for free and learn exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of hoping you'll find the right people at an event, or you'll get lucky and you'll meet this person who might introduce you to this person, take control of that activity. Look at an agency, determine who you want to meet, and begin to find the path to get there. Don't always jump straight to, let's use cybersecurity, right? I want to get right to the CISO, the cybersecurity or the information security officer, right? Don't always jump right there. Maybe you're coming in through a small business specialist. Maybe you're coming in through somebody related, and maybe it does make sense for you to go directly in if you've been doing work in other agencies with cybersecurity. But whatever it is, just identify who it is you want to meet. Go find their name and number, pick up the phone, call them, schedule an introduction meeting. You will have so much more luck building the relationship, this new relationship where you can get into an agency, than if you blindly go to an event. Now, before I move on to number 2, I do want to say that I like events. What I don't like is when we use them as a crutch, or when we use them as our primary way of trying to contact people. I hope I run into them. What I want you to do is have a proactive primary way of reaching out to people by finding them and picking up the phone, and a secondary way of reaching out to people by going to events. And so now you've got them both, but you're making sure you're not doing, again, constructive procrastination by going to this event and this event and this event. Just pick up the phone and call people. Okay, so down to the last 2. Number 2 area that we might be wasting our time, and this is a big deal to me, in particular in capture, when people are doing capture on an opportunity, is focusing on your competition. Stop thinking about your competition. Forget about them completely. That's my guidance to you today. And I know that it goes counter to what you might see in guidance out there. You need to do incumbent research and understand, especially who's going to compete and go after an opportunity. That might make sense on $1 billion opportunity when you got a couple of admirals on staff, and you're spending millions of dollars on a particular capture activity. That might make sense. But in a small business, who is my primary audience here, you're busy as can be. How much can you really learn about the competition first, right? It's just an exercise in futility from my perspective. But the other thing, and this is really big, if you're focusing on your competition, then you're not focusing on yourself. What I want you to do is to make your company so good and make your message about your company so clear that people forget about your competition. They just go straight in and go, here's the company I've been looking for. And ways you can do that is to understand your strengths and weaknesses. For example, when you look at your strengths, you want to build on those. When I had my last company, it was a SharePoint company. My biggest competitor, theoretically, was Microsoft. Microsoft made Microsoft SharePoint. Microsoft was in with every federal agency, and Microsoft had tons of engineers who were certified. But in my company, we didn't try to compete with them. We didn't try to understand how they would go in after an opportunity. We would just make ourselves even better than Microsoft by having, in the SharePoint space, by having really good past performances, by having very tight relationships that we could speak to with the government customer. And I'll give you a quick example. When I supported the VA used a tool called AvePoint. And AvePoint was this third-party tool that gave a lot of extra features to Microsoft SharePoint. Anyways, long story short, we built a relationship with AvePoint's leadership, the president of the company, all the salespeople, the product managers and product developers, we got certified, and we had more people certified in this AvePoint, which is a huge company, right? More people on our company certified than any other company. And what we were able to do that Microsoft couldn't was we had a really tight relationship that we shared with our customers saying, look, when you use AvePoint, if there's a feature that you want to see, but you don't see it, we have the ability to come right back there and influence moving that feature to the top of the list, getting it developed. Anyways, what we did was become the best SharePoint company that was out there. We built our past performance over and over again. And because we were focused on Microsoft SharePoint, we could do that. When you think too much about your competition, when you focus on your competition, you're distracted about what they're doing. You're reacting to what they're doing. And you're always a split second or a split year behind them. Instead of going, how can I be the best at what we do? If I'm writing an opportunity, how do I do capture correctly where I'm understanding the customer's challenges? I'm truly understanding their objectives, and I'm able to communicate that within a proposal. When you do that, you're blowing your competitors out of the door, or out of the water, excuse me. And when you do that, it will be really obvious to your customer that you're good at your core competency and that you know them. Remember, people only do business with people they know, like, and trust. This is that know part where they're getting to know you and trust you, right? Maybe not like you in this particular example, but they're trusting you. They're trusting that you know what you're doing. You're the subject matter experts, and they know that you care. One more thing, just because I love throwing these out here today, apparently, is people don't care what you know until they know that you care. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. If you're able to show them that you've done all sorts of research on their challenges and their mission and their objectives, then they will know that you care. And so then they will care what you know, which is your subject matter expertise. When you're focused on your competitor, that time is not being spent on your customer. And so, that's my recommendation to you, is forget about the competitor. Make yourself the very best janitorial company or cybersecurity company. Make yourself that best company, and your customers will know it. The last one, number one, got a couple minutes here. Last one is calling agencies and large primes. So I'm giving you 5 ways that I think people are wasting time. And my number one way is when people like you call or try to sell into an agency, or you call and try to sell into a large prime when you're not ready, right? I'm totally okay with you doing that when you're at a good position. I'll talk about that in a second. But when you're a company, let's say, that's under $5 million, my recommendation is that you should be focusing on building more relationships with small businesses that are successful. So if you're under 5 million, maybe you're trying to build a lot of relationships with companies that are between 10 and 20 million. They're in the agency that you want. You can still have access to the owner of that company and be able to introduce your company and where you might add value, et cetera. And so as you go through, if you focus on an agency very tightly, have a core competency, when you reach out to these small businesses, you have the chance to get on their in their pipeline with them, on opportunities with them. More often than not, you will be subcontracting. Sometimes you might be going after a large prime. But the reason I'm saying I feel like this is a mistake where people are wasting their time is that they're missing out on all this chance to build relationships with small businesses that could lead to mutual success, both of your companies growing together. Agencies, it's competitive in there as you start moving forward, and you only can write so many prime contracts, right? But if you build a relationship with 10 or 20 small businesses that are in the space that you want to be in, then you can manage, and I've talked about this before, where you can manage those relationships in a limited amount of time every month, but they will be aware of what you do. Hey, this company does elevators. When we do any project, they're our elevator go-to person, or these guys do risk management framework. They're our RMF go-to company. And you want to be known that way, and you want to have these relationships. When you do that, you have this potential to be building your company at $10 million a year as you have experience, right? I don't want to pretend like it happens instantly, but you have this ability when you break it down with 10 teaming partners, each one of them you're trying to land, let's say $100,000 or $1 million a year outgrowth, right? Not if you're not making money, don't sit there and think I'm suggesting you're going to make a lot of money right away. You have to move incremental. But when you have these relationships, now you're growing at a good, steady clip. And the reason I say it's kind of a waste of time to go into larges, for example, is larges will only work with you generally when you have solid past performance because they're trying to minimize their risk. They don't want to bring on a small business teaming partner and find out they can't do the work, or they don't want to bring on a small business teaming partner who doesn't know how to recruit their own staff, and then the larges are stuck with filling the positions, et cetera. There's all this risk they're trying to avoid, and the way that they can avoid it is by working with small businesses that have past performances already. The other reason they might work with you is if you have really good agency intimacy or understanding. So let's say you're an HHS and you're very deep into CMS, you know a lot of program managers. Well, that's attractive to the largest. Then you can be doing that. For a lot of us, we don't have those relationships. We don't have that past experience. We don't have a unique contract vehicle. So then we're spinning our wheels trying to think that a large would be attracted to us when we should be looking at smalls. And when I say small, let's say it's 10 million or more. In this scenario, we're looking at smalls to build a relationship for now until we get to that point where larges are attracted to you. And the same thing with an agency. When you go into an agency, they need to minimize their risk. And so if you don't have a good amount of past performance as a subcontractor, it's unlikely in the construction and services side of the house that you'll get a contract with the government. It can happen, but it's unlikely because your competitors are going to come in with really good past performances. They're going to come in with the clearances already in place, all the tools that need to be in there. You gain all that experience. You gain all those tools, your facility clearance level, all those type of things through your relationships with larges. And so my number one way to try to avoid, or thing I want you to avoid wasting your time on, is don't call agencies to try to get contracts or move yourself in there. And don't call large primes to get in there if you don't have a good amount of past performance within the federal government under small businesses teaming partner. Good rule of thumb is somewhere between 3 and 5 million. You decide, right? If you feel like you're just doing really good and at 2 million, you got solid past performances. I know there's a company that might be on today's call that does SharePoint out of San Diego. They could easily go into a large or an agency because they bring very specific focused area and expertise. If you're at that level, figure that out. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. Remember the 5 things that I'd like you to rethink how you're spending your time. And I call them constructive procrastination because they are constructive activity, but it's still procrastination from, reaching out, let's say, to the specific sales, building the right relationships. So they're federal, the FAR. Stop looking at the FAR unless there's real reasons. Don't dwell on category management best in class as a problem. Just go get on a contract vehicle that's in best in class if that's you. Don't attend events as your primary way of trying to meet people. Use it as a secondary way, but your primary way is to pick up the phone and call them. And the second one is focusing on your competition. Don't get caught up in looking at your competition. Make yourself so good that your competition is tracking you. What's that company doing? I want to pay attention to them. That's how you want to be, is that your competition is focusing on you and you are focusing on your customer. And the last one is focus a lot of energy on reaching out and building relationships with small businesses that are growing, that are 5, 10, 20 million as they're starting to grow. These are the ones that are going to grow into larger companies. Build a relationship now when it's really easy to talk with their leadership and get in and be part of the team. So that was what we talked about today. I hope you found it valuable. I'm going to look to see if we any questions. I hope this made sense. If you've got questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to put a comment in or shoot me a private message. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, if you found today's topic valuable. I wanted to remind you, I've been talking about building relationships, right? Tomorrow, I have a free webinar, 2 p.m. East Coast time tomorrow, on starting and building relationships that lead to federal revenue. In that webinar is where you'll see me talking about how do you build relationships with small businesses, whether they're business development and capture or the owner of the company, large primes and agencies. And so in there, I'll talk about different examples specific things you can do starting tomorrow to improve the way you do relationship building. Appreciate it, Jim. Thank you. I think we're done for the day. I hope you have a great day. Welcome to week 8. Remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you next time.